This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.
Welcome to NETtlen, a spin-off, I think is that the official term we have here from the FunBelt podcast, part of the Believe Network. If you listen to the FunBelt podcast, if you have that in your feed, you're going to start getting this along with some other spin-off shows we have. This one's NETtlen. It's a play on my name. I'm Shane Metlen, one of the co-hosts of the FunBelt podcast, and if you haven't already guessed, we're going to get into college basketball, Sunbelt basketball in particular, really heavily. If you listen to the FunBelt podcast, you know it's basically football season year-round for us there. We love Sunbelt football, but some of us also are very into Sunbelt basketball, and we're going to dive heavily into that on this show. We'll talk a little bit about net rankings and everything that goes with it, hence the name, the play on words there. Very, very clever. I had some help with my guest today coming up with this one, Jeremy Harper, one of our co-hosts on the FunBelt podcast, the Howl Raiser himself, with his Arkansas State blog, one of the best guys out there to talk about A-State. And he's a guy who has plenty of reason to be excited about Sunbelt basketball these days because his Red Wolves are the preseason favorites, off to a good start this season. And we're going to talk a little bit about them. We're going to talk about other games going around the Sun Belt this week, where everybody stands, just kind of, get into men's and women's basketball a little bit. But, we're going to start with the men's game because Jeremy's my guest, because his Red Wolves are doing so good. And we're recording this on a Wednesday afternoon, which is,
Sure.
Decent timing, I guess. There are some games tonight. Maybe people won't listen to this until after, we see a couple games happening tonight. I don't know, Jeremy, are you going to watch tonight? I don't know. Do you get on Bet Online, one of our great sponsors, and get a little action going so you have something to watch tonight?
Yeah, I haven't even checked the odds on Bet Online, one of the premier online betting platforms, by the way, Shane Metlen. I don't know if you knew that.
I do. Because Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform. I don't know if you knew that, Jeremy. The number one source for online betting in 2025. It's hard to believe we're already at 2025. But whether you're a seasoned fan or first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, the NHL, UFC, and college basketball.
Oh, that's what we're talking about.
Perfect for us. BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. Touchdowns to three-pointers to hat tricks. BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, every win. BetOnline, the game starts here, and it starts for us today. Coastal Carolina is at App State.
Yeah.
Georgia Southern at Georgia State, a little in-state rivalry action. I think both a couple competitive games should be tonight. App State favored fairly heavily against Coastal, which makes some sense to me. I think App State's going to be decent, and we'll get into where everybody stands here before too long. But Jeremy, let's talk heavily. Let's dive into the Red Wolves.
Okay.
Because, I mean, that's why you're here. That's why you're talking. That's why you're the first guest on NETtlen, is to talk about the preseason favorites who, despite I know you have shown some disappointment with their first conference loss at JMU here on Saturday. You're gonna lose some road games in this league, and we'll get into like what that means here in a little bit. But it's a great start to the season.
Good start for the Red Wolves. They got the MAC Challenge win over Akron to start the season, and which is always a good way to start the season. Got a couple revenge wins against UA Little Rock and Jackson State, two teams that beat Arkansas State last season. I know. Hey, NETtlen, anytime you want to irritate coach Brian Hodgson just mentioned the time that UA Little Rock beat Arkansas State, and he goes, I wouldn't say he goes ballistic, but he will be visibly agitated. So if you want to see that, I suggest you do that. And got the big win in Memphis. I went to the Memphis game with some friends of mine. They're Memphis guys, and they were kind of expecting a pretty easy win over Arkansas State. And I said, listen, if Arkansas State's going to beat Memphis, a ranked Memphis team, it's going to be this team. And sure enough, it happened. And it wasn't like just a defeat. It was a pretty thunderous, blistering opening minute to ending buzzer defeat for the Memphis Tigers, who have gone on. They're back in the top 25. So that's been a really great start for the season for Arkansas State. And then, of course, running into James Madison on the road. Always a hard place to win anyway. James Madison, I have to give them credit. Down by 13 at one point, came back in front of the home fans and got that win.
Yeah, I mean, the comeback was kind of taking a page out of Arkansas State's book, because they had that huge comeback against UAB. And you mentioned those victories, and I think that and those losses too, like from last year. I think that just goes to show you, like, Brian Hodgson, you're talking about losing to UA Little Rock, he's in Jackson State. That's the very beginning of Brian Hodgson's tenure at Arkansas State. And I guess you're going to lose some games early on when you're getting things figured out. I think it just shows like where they've come in a year's time.
Yeah.
To be coming off championship game appearance and then beating these teams that they're beating this year.
And not only that, when Hodgson was hired, he put together a really good team, a really good squad of guys that people were excited about last year. And that season started off really slow. The out of conference was not good at all. Came back with a losing record, had those kind of embarrassing losses to teams that we really felt like we shouldn't be losing to. And we were wondering, maybe, this wasn't going to be the hire that brings Arkansas State basketball out of the basement. But then there was something that clicked. I don't think it was just with the team that clicked, Shane. I think Coach Hodgson himself, kind of a young guy, never had the helm of a team before, always an assistant. I think he started coming into his own as a coach, not pressing so hard, kind of figured things out. And after that, had that great season, had that great run in the FunBelt tournament, which ended up again with James Madison. And James Madison was just too elite at that time, couldn't get over past those guys. But yeah, with Coach Hodgson in his second year, he just seems to be, very comfortable in his skin, very comfortable with his team. Probably wasn't very happy with how it ended with the Dukes, and hopefully he takes it out on South Alabama.
Yeah, and since you mentioned the FunBelt tournament, it gets into something that I think you're the perfect guy to talk to about, is the new format of the FunBelt tournament this year, where the top two teams basically get a bye into the semifinals. Not basically, they do. They get a bye into the semifinals, top two seeds.
It's not theoretical. It's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing on the whole. I like it. I like that they're doing something to try to like get their best teams into the NCAA tournament, which is what you want. So you have a chance to, maybe win some games in the tournament, get better seeds, all that stuff, and make the regular season matter.
Yeah.
I do think maybe we're going to see some complaints this year, though.
I don't know. I don't know, because the league-wide, especially from the older teams in the league, the guys that have been in the FunBelt playing basketball for many, many years, it's almost a terrible joke or a grim expectation that some hot team that has like a middling record will come in and run through the FunBelt tournament and win. It's happened again and again and again. And it's frustrating when you are Commissioner Gill and you're trying to elevate the profile of FunBelt basketball, and the representative is a team that was 500 in the regular season and is sort of a Cinderella going into the tournament, and then goes into the NCAA tournament and gets just whopped by a team. So it worked out really good last year. We had some buys. buy games that put some of the better teams up front. And the best team last year was James Madison, and lo and behold, James Madison ended up going to the tournament. So this year's format, I think, just totally cements that. Yes, I could see somebody like I don't know, let's say South Alabama cools off, and they feel like they should have a better shot. I don't know. I don't think they'll. Honestly, Shane, I don't think there'll be too much complaining.
Okay. Well, the reason I singled you out as the guy to talk about this is because the complaint I see coming this year in particular is that the top teams in the West are really good, and there's more than two of them.
You're predicting I'm going to be complaining.
Maybe, or maybe, we'll get some, South Alabama guests or Troy. Those are the three teams that I think are really good in this conference right now is Arkansas State, South Alabama, and Troy. And I think JMU, if they play their best, is kind of up there. But I just envision this situation where, South Alabama, Troy, Arkansas State all still have to play each other home and away. And we're going to see the start of that this week with, huge A-State, South Alabama game. But, they're going to eat each other up a little bit. And the East looks like a little bit easier division. And, JMU in particular doesn't have to go to Arkansas State. They got them at home and got the win. Yeah. They've already played South Alabama, took their lump there. They get Troy at home. They got Southern Miss at home. Southern Miss is not great, but they're really tough to beat in Hattiesburg, and all those teams have to go there. Like, I think the division is going to make a difference this year, and I think that's where the complaints might end up coming in. This is, getting ahead of ourselves maybe a little bit, but and I don't think you necessarily change things up because of that, because last year the clear top two teams were in the East, so it was a different situation. But I do wonder if we'll start to see some complaints, if somebody like a really good Troy team takes a few losses and now they're having to play an extra game or two in the conference tournament.
Yeah, I guess my answer to that, Shane, and this is not going to be a popular answer, maybe even a realistic answer, is that maybe elevate your program to where it has a chance to get an at-large bid. I mean, we're in a situation right now in the Sun Belt where we keep trying to make that happen. And Arkansas State is definitely guilty of this, of just not being good and totally wrecking the chances of everybody else around them that play them. The league itself has got to find a way to get these marquee wins at the beginning of the season and make it to where playing Sun Belt teams during the rest of the season is worth that net score. So yeah, if it comes down to somebody complaining about not being able to get that sweet position in the Sun Belt tournament, maybe the answer is to look within yourselves and improve the product that you put on the court.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I feel like the Sun Belt made some progress in that direction the past 2 years. Absolutely. They weren't there. They weren't there where they're really in the discussion, but you get 4 teams in the top 100 2 years ago, and you're kind of liking taking that step. And then last year, it wasn't as many teams in the top 100, but App State and JMU were both legitimately really good. Either one of those teams could have beat anybody in the country on a given night. And so you had that to at least kind of be like, yeah, either one of these teams is capable of winning a game in the NCAA tournament. And even though they weren't really on the bubble, you had that to talk about. This year, it's just been a little step backwards. And I don't know, you're going to have bad years. You're going to have good years. But I think it's going to be key for the Sun Belt to figure something out because, look, I'll run through the net rankings right now.
Let's do it. Oh, God. Do we have the stomach for that?
Arkansas State, 97. Great. Yeah. 2 top 100 teams. Drops off pretty quickly. You got Troy, 113. JMU, 130. Texas State, 164. Then it gets brutal. Brutal at the bottom. You look at ULM, 348 in the country. ODU, 345. And ODU's winning some conference games. So now they're that's to be expected. Teams are going to be, but now they're hurting the league by winning these games. Louisiana 327. Yep. And then you got teams hovering around, Southern Miss 298, Georgia Southern 290, Coastal 282. Like, you're in danger of having half the league or almost half the league sub 300, which just eats you alive. I mean, Arkansas State or South Alabama, they're in the top 100 right now. They could go on a run and just be crushed by the fact they have to play all these teams. And it's really not a good year for the Sun Belt and net. And I don't think that's what do about that other than hope you're better next year.
We look a lot like the SWAC. That's how bad it's looking right now. I tell you what, though, here's something that impressed me about South Alabama was they really did kind of show you how you can vastly improve your net, even if it's against, a schedule that's not that great, and that's by blowing out teams.
Yeah.
Their last 4 games, they've blown out their opponent by at least 20. And all of a sudden, they go from like 130 or wherever they were in the net to the best net in the Sun Belt at 91. Isn't that what you said, Shane? I think they're at 91.
Yeah, I think they dropped to 92 today.
Okay, yeah, 92.
Yeah.
Any given day, 91 or 92. And that was pretty extraordinary. I thought pretty much South Alabama would be consigned to the upper hundreds. But here they are after 4 big blowout wins. And that's kind of how you have to do it, Shane, in the Sun Belt. You can't be like, look across to your opposing coach and say, okay, we're going to let off the guys and put the B team in. You've got to crush your opponent every night if you want to keep that net right.
Yeah, which is, why Keith Gill has kind of encouraged teams to schedule. So you're playing teams that are not very good at home and getting those blowouts. And it's tough, though, because that means you got to pay those teams to come in or do it home and home. And then you're on the road to the next year and you don't get a ton out of that, like as far as the net boost. And it's tough for the Sun Belt really to put together the formula because, give Arkansas State credit, like for going on the road and beating a Memphis and beating a UAB and playing those games. But, they're taking a risk by doing that. You lose those games. It doesn't mean you're a bad team, but net wise, you'd be rewarded more for playing, UCA or Jacksonville State, as we talked about earlier, like playing those teams at home and beating the crap out of them. And it's tough, like, to convince coaches that that's what you have to do. It's tough to convince ADs that that's what you have to do to pay those teams because, you still hear it from coaches. We're a 1-bid league. We just have to prepare for conference play. So it's a little bit of yeah, we'd love to be a 2-bid league, but it's not going to do me any good to make the sacrifice that our league gets. But it's a tough conversation to have, I think, about how you're supposed to schedule and play those games. But South Alabama maybe found the trick is, just blow out your conference mates.
That might be the key.
Easier said than done.
Well, I'll tell you one thing about net. Net was supposed to fix that, Shane. With RPI, it was kind of either wins and losses, and I forget what else it factored. Didn't seem to factor much. Net was supposed to be something that would encourage larger programs to either get out of their home schedules or invite tougher opponents to come into their houses. And I think what we ended up seeing is just a lot of neutral site games. Let's have a tournament out in the Bahamas or something. We'll get everybody together, and maybe it helps your net, maybe it doesn't. I tell you one thing, beating Memphis, the immediate reaction from Memphis pundits was, hey, we don't need to be scheduling Arkansas State anymore. So it was like the lesson wasn't we need to be prepared for teams like Arkansas State. The lesson was, hey, our team just doesn't need to be playing Arkansas State because it hurts our chances. As it turns out, it didn't hurt their chances too much. But that was the immediate reaction. It's probably the immediate reaction to a lot of teams when they get beat by, like when James Madison. Who did James Madison beat last year? I know they beat Wisconsin in the tournament.
Michigan State.
They beat Michigan State. Is Michigan State knocking on James Madison's door to play again for a rematch?
No, they had a really tough time finding teams to play them this year.
I know. I heard James Madison fans complaining about that. They were like, oh, man, now we can't get anybody to play us. And they're kind of getting that stone cold reality of success. When you find a little bit of success in the mid-majors, it's just difficult to schedule marquee games. And that's why we have about 10 SEC teams every year in the NCAA tournament. So,
yeah, and I think you're right that the net was maybe intended to like have the opposite effect, because in theory, if you're Memphis, you're kind of encouraged to go play a game at Arkansas State, because if you lose on the road to Arkansas State, it doesn't hurt you that much. If you beat Arkansas State, a top 100 team at their place, that helps you. But that's not what Memphis or these other programs are doing. They're thinking, what would be better? What really helps us, and there's no risk at all, is to play Prairie View A&M and beat them by 40.
Yeah, you beat them by 40, you take the nice net bump. And also, if you invite, let's say, Prairie View, Prairie, UNM Prairie, A&M Prairie? No, A&M Prairie, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. You invite them to your venue, and they somehow beat you, it's catastrophic to your net. So they don't even want to do that. So, or if you invite a team like the Red Wolves or James Madison over, you get hurt with that too. So the point is that there's a lot of fraidy cats in NCAA basketball, and I wish that there was some sort of more incentive to make the scheduling a little bit easier.
Yeah. So let's get back into talking a little bit more about the Red Wolves. This is your Red Wolves show today.
Okay.
Obviously they're coming off that loss to JMU, which, as we said before, you're going to lose some road games in conference play, which is the other kind of thing that hurts mid-majors. Is you take a bump from that when it's to be expected. Like, it's no matter what league you're in, it's tough to win road games, and so now they get South Alabama here this week, which is looking like maybe the game of the year in the conference. It's not the one. We saw Arkansas State and App State got bumped up to ESPN2 today for later this month, but the South Alabama Arkansas State game is looking like potentially the best, most interesting, most competitive game and on the Sun Belt slate, at least so far from what we've seen from these teams.
Yeah, and they're kind of opposite teams, Shane. I don't know if you've gotten to take a look at either team very closely, but I was looking at South Alabama, and they're not prolific scorers. They're around the bottom of the league for scoring. They're definitely down in the bottom of the league for rebounding. How they win games is through turnovers and just patient three-point shooting. These guys are really good around the perimeter. They've got a couple of guys that are forwards who can make the three. And their turnover margin, Shane, it's almost astronomical. They have this 6.8 turnover margin. That's the fifth best in all of college basketball. So they're gonna create turnovers. They're gonna pick your pocket. They're very fast. They're not very big, but they're very quick around the edges. Arkansas State, in the meantime, 12th in the nation for rebounding. They like to play in the paint. I know James Madison ended up beating them in the paint, but that's where they like to be. They're kind of known for shooting a lot of 3-pointers, and that's just kind of their bread and butter. But this year they've been really good at pounding the glass, about making the bucket their own. What right now they're missing Sun Belt preseason player of the year, Kobe Julian, who's been out with a bum ankle. I think we're going to see him in Mobile tomorrow. I think he'll be ready. He was actually on the bench dressed out against James Madison. I think they wanted to hopefully rest him one more night, but quite frankly, we could have really used him against James Madison and the bigs that James Madison has. But yes, I think it's going to be a really interesting game, in that you got one team that scores the most points in the Sun Belt, and you got another team that has prevents the has the least amount of points scored against them. So it should be, something's got to break, Shane.
Yeah, and you talk about South Alabama causing those turnovers, and I'll just go to the two JMU games that I was able to see. Is that South Alabama had a ton of success pressuring the ball and getting steals, doing that out on the perimeter. And JMU against Arkansas State, I think one thing I noticed they did really early in the game was they sagged back and they took away those lob passes that Arkansas State loves to throw at the rim. And they were knocking those away. They were just playing off them. And you didn't even see Arkansas State try as many of them as the game went on because, James, you defended that really well. But that's not really what South Alabama, I think, wants to do. Maybe they want to try to like get in your face and make that pass harder to throw. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how South Al is able to defend that because, do they take that film lesson from JMU and try to play a little bit differently, or do they just play their own game and hope that their pressure defense takes that away from Arkansas State? Because when they get their guys going to the rim, like Arkansas State's electric offensively.
Yeah, they've got tanks on the team, and that's something that Arkansas State hasn't always had. Guys that can plow through and create that open lane. But I will tell you, I was watching the South Alabama game versus Georgia Southern on Saturday, and Georgia Southern didn't score for the first 8 minutes of the game, which was I was kind of rooting for a 0-point half because it would have been kind of wacky. They ended up making some points. South Alabama also had problems scoring. They didn't score until I think they had 3 for that first 8 minutes before they finally ripped the cap off the 3-point bucket and just started nailing them. Ended up with a 20-point lead and never relinquished it. But yeah, they're not great shooters. They have guys that can make some points, and but they do not have guys that can keep you from getting the easy layup. And so that's, I think, where Arkansas State's going to have an advantage. But I will tell you, Shane, and James Madison showed this too, that if you pressure Arkansas State enough, they will make plenty of mistakes. And you're right. James Madison took away that lob pass on the inside. Arkansas State was blocked an alarming number of times. It was kind of interesting to watch. And also what James Madison did is they sort of identified the hot hand, and that was Taron Todd. And they started bottling up Todd, working on him. And Arkansas State didn't really make an adjustment. There's plenty of other weapons they could have chosen to release the pressure off Todd. The game plan just seemed to let's let Todd win this game. So I don't know. Hopefully Coach Hodgson saw that and said, hey, listen, we need to distribute better. We need to be a little bit more like Troy and South Alabama and just be better at making assists and finding an open guy.
Yeah, and that's one area where if they get Kobe Julian back, that might make a huge difference because then you got 2 legit scorers out there that can get a bucket just about any time.
Yeah, and this other thing with Kobe Julian, he had a game before he got injured where he had 16 points, 14 of them through free throws. So the guy knows how to draw a foul, and he knows how to make free throws, which is something that in college basketball is a gem to have. So, yeah, missing him very much.
Yeah, and Arkansas State didn't get to the line in that loss against JMU very much. I think they shot 1 free throw in the first half. They shot maybe 8 for the game. It wasn't – they weren't getting to the free throw line, and I think part of that was that, like you said, Taron Todd kind of had the ball in his hands a lot, and he got his points, but there wasn't necessarily a reason to foul him or bump him or anything going to the basket either. So we'll see. I think Kobe Julian, at the end of the year, we may be talking about those games that Kobe Julian missed and how that really affected the standings and everything.
Yeah, when Arkansas State doesn't get that bye in the tournament, and I'm bitching and complaining about the format.
Well, we'll replay the first of this episode when you said it was fine.
Please do. I want to receive all the smoke for that.
Yeah. Hey, well, let's get into the games this week. We talked a little bit Coastal, App, and Georgia Southern, Georgia State today. Tonight, Wednesday night games. Let's just get your quick opinion. Who do you have in those games? Let's start Coastal, App State.
Well,
have there.
What's funny is all 4 of these teams are 1-2, so they're all kind of struggling a little, hoping to get that 500 in conference. If you had to pull my fingernails out for wins, you got to think Appalachian State's going to beat Coastal. Coastal has to come to Appalachian State. Nobody wants to go to Boone, Shane, to play basketball. It's a long way away. The air is thin. The crowd is usually pretty hostile. There's no way Coastal Carolina wins that game. Georgia Southern versus Georgia State. Georgia State, they're kind of they beat Louisiana, and now they're kind of feeling themselves a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia State wins this game.
Yeah, I think in Atlanta, that's probably a good one for Georgia State to kind of get right. After you said struggling a little bit at times, but I think there's some talent there. And Georgia Southern much improved this year, I think. But when in doubt, go with the home team. I think is what we'll end up saying a lot here.
And after what I saw how Georgia Southern played against South Alabama, I don't know if I have much confidence in the Eagles at this moment. They just didn't seem to have, I don't know. They seem to be missing a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
And Georgia State seems like a team that has a lot of pieces that just haven't come together yet. Georgia State's one of those teams that I feel like at the end of the season will be dangerous.
Yeah. Thursday night is kind of the normal night for Sunbelt basketball.
Yeah.
Some interesting ones on here. We've already talked a lot about Arkansas State, South Alabama. We can skip that, but
let's do that.
Yeah, let's start with Texas State, Troy. One of those Western matchups where there's just no easy games necessarily in the West. Even Texas State 1-2 against undefeated in conference play Troy. Troy's looked really good lately. I like Troy in this one, but yeah, I mean, Texas State seems like a team that, if they can kind of establish the pace, they always have a chance.
Yeah, Texas State a couple games ago lost. They were leading UT Arlington, former Sun Belt team, and then they lost the game in the second half, and they never seemed to have recovered from that, Shane. They don't seem like the same team, and I gotta dig deeper and see if there's some sort of injury or something. But Texas State just not playing up to Texas State levels. They haven't played up to Texas State levels in some time. Meanwhile, Troy, they're just playing Scott Cross ball. It's a bunch of guys that played together for a long time. They get the entire team from last year. They got the Rigsby brothers out there. They could probably make assists in their sleep to one another. It's just a good team. The one, I don't know, slight I have against Troy is that most of their wins have come against clearly smaller or inferior programs. And when they play a higher profile program, let's say Houston or Oregon or Arkansas, the final scores are blowouts. So Troy has yet to really come up with that signature win, and I'd like to see what they do against the Bobcats on Thursday.
Yeah, another Thursday night game at 7:00 Eastern time. We always used Central Time on the main feed here, but I'm hosting. I'm on the East Coast, so 7:00. JMU at Marshall. JMU is coming off that big win that we've talked about already. JMU is looking for its first true road win of the season.
Yeah,
they can get it.
I was watching James Madison versus Wake Forest a couple of weeks ago, and I thought what was missing from the Dukes was a big inside presence. Like Wake Forest, they were just kind of abusing James Madison inside. While James Madison had all these great outside shooters, they just didn't have anybody in there to really bully anybody. And that's how I thought of James Madison until Arkansas State played in James Madison. I saw they had plenty of inside presence. So I don't really know what to make of James Madison. I see James Madison coming in here because I feel like Coach Spradlin has his team playing hot right now. I think you made a comment in your article that you've got a lot of great transfer guys that finally seem to be gelling. I don't know if Marshall has that, so I would be picking James Madison as well.
Yeah, although Marshall, their backcourt I think is maybe a little inexperienced, but they do have, Anachili Killen, I don't know if he's quite 7 foot, but he's big. He can match up with the JMU guys. So it could be a tough one for JMU. They really got to show that they can win some games on the road if they're going to be a factor in the race.
Yeah, that has been the problem with James Madison, and it would be something that you need to do. But Arkansas State, I felt the same way. They needed to win that game against James Madison if they were going to show. So anyway, I hate to bring it back to Arkansas State.
Yeah,
let's just say James Madison, I think, is going to win this game. How's about that?
Later in the night, ODU, Old Dominion, is at Louisiana. Two teams that really struggled in the conference and now sit 2-1 in Sunbelt play.
How's that possible?
One of those teams is going to be 3-1 to start the play after really struggling early. Which one's it going to be, Jeremy?
They just both don't seem good. And I don't know. I can't identify how they ended up 2-1. Old Dominion, when the only time I really saw them play was against Arkansas State, and they just look listless. It's like once they get down, they don't seem to have the ability to regroup, adjust, and come up with another game plan. I haven't seen Louisiana at all this year. I just know what they've lost. And to see that they're 4-11 seemed about right. I guess I have to give the advantage to the Cajuns for being in the Cajun Dome, because it is tough to play against the Cajuns when they're at home. So that's what I got, Shane.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Cajun Dome's a tough place to play. And I do kind of like, you mentioned ODU looking a little listless. On the flip side, I listened to a press conference with Derek Zimmerman, the interim coach at Louisiana, and it really seems like his guys have kind of like embraced him getting the job, getting the chance. Sounds like they had a massive celebration for his first win as the interim head coach. And, he told them, okay, we can do that once, but we can't treat every victory like it's a championship game. We're going to wait till a championship before we do this again. So I kind of like, I guess, maybe the vibe around the Cajuns a little bit better. But, two surprise teams at 2-1 so far, conference play. Less as a surprise is that both ULM and Southern Miss have struggled a little bit. ULM looking for their first conference game at Hattiesburg, which, as I said before, is a really tough place to play. I think Southern Miss handles the Warhawks in this one. Apologies to Thibodeau, who's not with us, but what do you think, Jeremy?
First of all, Thibodeau would 100% agree that they're not going to win. I think ULM. I think what Shane or what Dusty said about his Warhawks is that there's really only about 5 guys on the team. That the rest of the team is either hurt or not very good. So by the time the second half rolls around, the team's exhausted and then they get blown out. One thing that Southern Miss has, they actually have some guys that are compelling. Like I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, Shane, but Denaje,
I think is
Denaje. He's Denaje Harris. That guy's an actual player. I mean, he knows how to hoop. I've seen him in the game. That the team relies on him when the going gets tough. I saw him in a game. God, it might have been against the Cajuns, where he. Let me look up at this schedule, see where they got that. Maybe it was against Marshall, actually, where they won the game against Marshall 68-66. It was Harris that they were looking for. It was Harris that they really relied on. I don't know if the Warhawks have a guy that they can look at and go, hey, that's the guy that's going to lead us to victory. So, yeah, 100%. It's going to be Southern Miss. Southern Miss is going to be pretty happy at the end of this game.
Yeah, I like Southern Miss. Like, when they have it all together, I think they're a little better than their record. Harris was sick last week.
Yeah.
And they struggled a little bit without him at full strength. They got Andre Cabello back, who, when his head's on straight, he's the most talented player in the conference. Like,
absolutely,
the dude is really good when he's playing to his capabilities. So
I remember he came back late last year. I think he was injured most of the year, and then finally at the end of the year was made available, and he was really the best guy on the court.
Yeah, he's really good. Difference maker for them if they just haven't had everybody all at once in a long time, and they have Harris, Curbelo, Naftali Perez, who was hurt last week too. Like they get all three of those guys playing together and playing well at once. Southern Miss all of a sudden looks pretty tough to beat. So,
yeah, they look like I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna say that Southern Miss looks like the team that at the end of the season, just kind of like Georgia State, in my opinion, are going to be the guys that are just you don't want to see them on your schedule, and you definitely don't want to see them in an early round at the FunBelt tournament.
Yeah, which goes into the earlier conversation of like how tough it's going to be to get through the West, where you got to play all those teams home and away, and I think it's going to be an interesting conference run. Even though there's some particularly bad teams in the Sun Belt, there's some pretty solid ones. I think it's going to make for an interesting rest of the season. Hopefully makes doing this show worth it because I'm going to have some fun with it. I think it'll be fun. We'll probably have Jeremy back again at some point. Let's talk women's basketball real quick.
Okay.
We wrap it up. Well, there's actually some good stuff to talk about because we talk about that, if you're ever going to get to a two-bid league situation, the women are closer right now.
Tell me more.
Well, JMU is a top 50 net team right now. And I think it's going to be really hard for them to play their way into an at-large at this point. They didn't get that signature win against a tough schedule in the non-conference. They got some solid ones, some solid Q2 type wins. But we were talking about how, you were at least able to start the conversation with men's basketball a couple of years ago. Women's basketball, you're at that place where, you can start the conversation. Like, I think JMU was even showing up in like the
Sure.
second 4 out of a bracketology recently.
Nice.
So, that's good for the women, especially, we're looking for money in the Sun Belt, and they're handing out units for the women's tournament this year. So if you can get a team that wins a game or get a couple teams in the years to come, that's more money for the conference. That'd be big. A couple top 100 teams for the women. JMU seems to be kind of like the class of the league right now, but Coastal, ODU, they're looking pretty good. It should be a pretty interesting race, similar to the men's side where all your top teams or most of your top teams are in the West. You're going to have those home and homes against JMU, Coastal, ODU in the East. That might shake things up a little bit. So could be a pretty interesting women's race as we'll have to talk more about women's basketball, some of the future episodes, get some good women's basketball guests in here. I want to keep it a little bit balanced, but for today, I think that's just kind of, the early rundown of where things stand in the Sun Belt women's side.
I will say this about collegiate women's basketball in general. I was actually having a conversation with my son about this over pizza yesterday. We're talking about the game and how it's evolved for women. And it used to be in my time, I'm 50 years old. I've been watching sports for a while. It used to be there was only 2 women's programs that you could count on for excellent women's basketball. And that was Tennessee and Connecticut, right?
Yeah.
Those teams, legendary coaches, legendary players battling it out. And now it seems like that pool has really deepened, Shane. I mean, there's still not a huge number of programs out there. Not like, you see in the men's where anybody can win at any given time. But now there's maybe 20 programs out there that you can watch and see excellent basketball being played. Sunbelt isn't there yet. James Madison, Coastal Carolina, Old Dominion, these are good teams. I'll give you that. But, man, when you see our teams, Sunbelt teams, play more resource teams, teams with a bit richer history in women's basketball, you see the difference. And I'm hoping maybe I'm hoping the talent is finally coming back down to the Sun Belt.
Yeah, it's you saw the difference. JMU is the top team in the Sun Belt this year, and they play Texas, they play Notre Dame,
and
top 5 teams, and you just see the difference. Like they're not there yet, and they play a top 25 NC State team. And it's a lot closer situation, but there's still a big difference between those real top tier teams. But that also makes what we're talking about with the net and everything so huge in women's basketball, is because getting from the 13 seed to the 12 in the NCAA tournament is ridiculously huge advantage, because the 13 seed's playing on the road against a 4 seed in the women's game. It's not a neutral court game. The 12 seed is playing in that same gym against the 5 seed. So not only is it neutral, but like really you end up with the home team's crowd rooting for you because they want to see that 5 seed get beat. Like it's a huge, huge difference. You never see a 13-over-4 upset in women's basketball, but you'll see 12-over-5 like fairly often. And it's been a while since the Sun Belt has gotten that 12 seed. JMU looks like they could, if they, finish strong, kind of stay where they are. If they win the conference tournament, they might be in position to get like 11 or 12 seed, which is a big, big deal for the Sun Belt right now.
Well, you got that Peyton McDaniel out there scoring. What is she scoring now? Almost 15 points a game. That's pretty good. I mean, if you can get a hyper or somebody who's scoring a regular amount of points and have that consistent, I think James Madison has a chance. Or maybe it's actually nice to see, Shane, that there are in the Sun Belt, it looks to be about 4 or 5 teams out there that could be competitive. What surprises me a little bit is that UL Monroe isn't competitive this year. That last year they made a big step, they made a big jump, and now they've taken a step back.
Yeah, and one of the other keys, we haven't mentioned like the lower teams of the conference. We'll get more into them in another episode, but nobody outside of top 300 on the women's side, which is a big deal. You're not going to like just get killed by playing a conference game that you have no choice but to play. So that's good. You want to see that get back to where on the men's side, you only have maybe 1 or 2 sub 300 teams. So, yeah, I think that's just about going to do it for us today. This has been the first, hopefully not the only episode.
What did you think of it? Did it feel good, Shane?
It felt good. I love talking about basketball. I think you do too.
I did. Well, there were several years I didn't want to talk about basketball at all because of Arkansas State just wasn't good and it depressed me. But I have to admit that when you're part of the conversation, Shane, suddenly you start looking at the other box scores from other teams. Suddenly you start offering unsolicited advice to fans from other teams. Like, hey, man, maybe if you got one more big, you might be able to compete. Or have you considered playing more zone? You start acting very arrogant. And I'm enjoying that arrogance, Shane. I'm feeding off of it.
If I know anything about Jeremy Harper, is that he enjoys arrogance. So thank you for doing this with me today, Jeremy. And even the stuff you're doing behind us, people don't even realize you're basically the producer of this episode today too. So
I hit the record button. That is my production value.
So appreciate that too. You've been listening to the NETtlen podcast, which is a spinoff of the FunBelt podcast, which is part of the Believe Network, which if you can follow all that means you're a hardcore Sunbelt sports fan, and you're exactly the person we want to talk to. So thank you for tuning into this one. Take care.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.